and we're throwing the bones here where we're going to do our defensive breakdown for spring practice. And here's our coaching staff, Honky.
Yeah, so basically just kind of a piggyback off of what we just talked about there. Get my head away from the Herdat logo over me.
No, just keep it right over your head. It's fine.
Yeah, here we go. We'll just go like this here. So kind of like that, actually. At defense coordinator, we have Tony White. On the D-line, Terrence Knighton. Linebackers, Rob Dvorak. Secondary is Evan Cooper. And then the three guys that we just talked about, Kevin McGrary is the senior defensive analyst. Josh Bringwell is the defensive quality control. And Jack Potenza is the other defensive quality control. And then we're also going to discuss special teams tonight. So we have Ed Foley there, the special teams coach, and Josh Martin is the special teams analyst. Just like last week, for anyone that's going to be listening here, watching it on YouTube, we'll divide this up into segments of just position. We'll also do one of all the position groups together, one big video of that. And the players that are listed, I'm going to say it here, and I know we're still going to get responses on YouTube and Twitter and all that. We're only going over scholarship guys right now. That's because there's 100+ scholarship players on the team. So that's more than enough to discuss. But yes, we absolutely believe that there are going to be walk-ons that will play roles on this team, walk-ons that will find their way into scholarships once the season gets going. But for right now, for the purpose of what we're doing today, heading into spring ball next week, we're just looking at the scholarship players right now.
Boomer, did you get that? Honky saying that Rule is cutting the walk-on program.
That's right.
Yep, that's what I took away from that.
Gone.
So,
yep.
It's completely gone. Yes. He's cutting tradition.
NFL-sized roster. That's what he wants. So.
Black shirts are gone. This is over.
We don't even need 85 scholarships. We don't need 53. We need to manage the roster.
And with that, we're going to go with defensive line here first to start off with. And just like last week, again, I'll read down from top to bottom, starting with the seniors. And Stephen Wynn Jr., senior, 6'3", 305, the transfer from a year ago from Alabama. Nash Hutmacher, junior, 6'4", 330, but he's been in the program now for 4 or 5 years. Ty Robinson, another junior, 6'6", 310. Ruquan Buckley, sophomore, 6'6", 290. Elijah Judy, a sophomore, 6'3", 300. He's the transfer from A&M this offseason. Vincent Carroll Jackson, freshman, 6'5", 270. Rob, you talked with him month and a half ago. He was on the Redcast. Sua Lefotu, freshman, 6'4", 300 from California. Cameron Lenhart, a freshman, 6'3", 245, and he's on campus right now. And then Riley Van Poppel, freshman, 6'5", 275 from Texas. So I guess I'll kind of start with you, Dave, as you see that list. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Nash Hutmacher has been here long enough that you get his name right.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Hut Nashmacher, yeah.
I mean, it looks a little thin, right? Especially with experience. You like Ty Robinson's been there for a while. I think Nash still has the potential, and we've seen him play more and more. Stephen Wynn with a full year in the system and with offseason conditioning, et cetera, hopefully can play a larger role. I mean, I think they're high on Ruquan Buckley. I think they aggressively went after Elijah Judy, so maybe they can make immediate contributions. I think the freshmen, I would think are probably freshmen that aren't going to see too much. So that really tells me that they're a little thin on depth, and they still may go get another guy in the portal after spring ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 3-3-5 that they're running, that will be interesting to see what they do. They always talk about how it's multiple and they can get into 4-man fronts and 3-man fronts.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the same thing this year that I said last offseason, which is that changes up what type of defensive line bodies you need. If you're in a 4-man front, you may need 2 big-bodied guys, and then your ends can be anything from a Cameron Lenhart size guy, or maybe some of the guys that we're going to show on the next slide, which is the edge players. Some of those guys might fill in at defensive ends if you're in a 4-3, but in a 3-man front, you're more likely going to need 3 of these big bodies out there. Stephen Wynn intrigues me because he's an example of a transfer that I wouldn't want to take this year in the same way. I wouldn't want to take a guy in May or June getting here, and that's what he came here last year, and I think it stunts the growth and the development a little bit. But he's been here now for a year, and now he'll go through the full off season, and I think we have a good opportunity to see what he can do, right from the start, right in game 1. Hutmacher, like you said, he's been well developed here. He's been here a long time. He's ready to play, and so is Robinson. Robinson's been playing a lot, so there's some experience there, and there's some size. I mean, you throw Judy in there, and he's a big dude, and Buckley. That's 5 guys that if they can pan out, I mean, you've got a little bit of depth going there, but you probably don't want to get too much deeper than that. You start getting into true freshmen on the D line in this conference, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Rob?
Yeah, I was going to say that this was probably this D line probably raised a lot more red flags for me than the offensive line, in that, there's only 3 carryovers from the previous administration, we'll call it, and in the
4, Buckley was here.
Well, yeah, but he didn't see as much playing time.
No,
so and
but
that's
fully
and in the previous, I think in the previous like 5 years or something, there's really only like 2 like actual recruits from Frost that saw playing time. I think in Hutmacher and Robinson, I think it was, and then obviously Wynn was a transfer, and Buckley, I think last year as a freshman, he didn't see a ton of playing time, and then and so you've got those guys, and then even then they didn't have a lot of recruits in the pipeline. I think Van Poppel was the only one that they actually were able to retain from that class, and he called. I think I saw a story where he called Van Poppel within 4 hours of his hiring to make sure, and Van Poppel was all in. He fell in love with Lincoln, the school, the facilities. So for him, he just needed the reassurances from the coaches, and at that point, I think he committed right away. Yeah, I should point out too that he is the son of first-round Oakland A's draft pick of Todd Van Poppel, who was a pitcher for the A's for a while, who hopefully his son's career at Nebraska pans out a lot better than his major league career did before he went over to Texas.
Hey, Boomer, did Todd Van Poppel play in the College World Series? Look that up.
I'd have to look that up. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I'm almost positive that Todd Van Poppel did. Maybe he was just a high draft pick, but
yeah,
he was.
I think it was a high school draft pick, if I recall, but I probably wrong because baseball draft is so weird. But anyway, I mean, either way though, I think I agree with you, Dave. I think they're gonna have to add a player or 2 out of the portal if they can get like a nice 5, 6, 7-man rotation on that line. But again, with the 3-3-5 defense, they may not need it as much based off of what they're doing and the other positions that we're looking at, like with safeties and linebackers. But at the same time, it's an area where it's concerning. I won't lie. I mean, I'm over here drinking Kool-Aid and I'm still concerned about it.
Yeah, a couple of things, Honky, just on this. I mean, to your point of Stephen Wynn Jr., didn't have as big of an impact last year because he came in after spring ball. Anybody who's brought in, I don't know how big of an expectation we can have for him.
Yep.
But maybe just enough depth to get a six guy in there with some experience at the D1 level. And then obviously that the walk-ons do play a part of this, right? I mean, they didn't cut the walk-on program, so there could be someone there in that pool. Maybe I'm even blanking on someone who probably played last year.
Well, Colton Feast is a good example.
Colton Feast was, I was gonna say he's
right, but Colton's not back, right?
No. Feast and Drew both graduated, so they're done.
Right.
And
so someone could emerge there, and we might even see that here in spring ball, where 1 or 2 walk-ons, get into a regular rotation, and we might feel better about this in a month, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is your scholarship, group here, but where walk-ons can provide depth, there may be a transfer of a position guy too. There could be an O lineman who switches the D line. That
Rules does that. Yep,
Rules done that. So this is what we kind of know right now going into spring ball. But when we get to post spring ball, we're going to do our depth chart like we did last year. That's a fun show, and we'll know a lot more hopefully by then. Not just from what we've seen in the spring game itself, but also what we've heard from all the talk over those 15 practices. So there's a lot that can happen between them. But to your point, Dave, if you're waiting till after the semester is done to bring in a couple more transfers so that we can fill out this room, I'm just already going to say that guy, whoever you bring in, better just be so ready made and to play instantly, because we've seen it last year. We brought in 2 guys. We brought in Wynn, and then we brought in Drew from Texas Tech. And Drew had played 900 snaps in 2 seasons at Texas Tech, P5 football, a lot of snaps. Guy didn't get here till August. And that it can't help but stunt the development of the player. And for what Coach Rule wants to be, which is a development program, and we've talked about this in previous shows, the marriage, so to speak, of being a development program in today's transfer portal world is you've got to get these guys in now to develop them.
Here's a question. Maybe Boomer will have a thought on this. What if someone like Tony White, the defensive coordinator, finds someone from Syracuse, right, that he is familiar with, has coached, knows the system, and is looking for maybe more playing time or just wants to move on? I mean, that might solve that transition problem, huh?
Yeah, it could, but of course that requires there to be someone from Syracuse who fits that role. I haven't looked at their roster lately, and I don't.
Damn logic, Boomer! Come on, man.
Yeah, I know, but and if their starting D line is suitable for the Big Ten and what they'll be going up against, I mean, I guess it's something we can look at here in a little while. But yeah, it's hard to fill in those guys. Like Anki said, too late after the fact of just filling them in. I mean, I think a lot of times when you're going that late in the transfer portal, that's where you're just looking to add depth to have bodies at that point, just in case something happens, because you're not really expecting a ton out of anybody
that you're
getting that late. So yeah,
you're just getting a grad transfer, a one and done that is just a stopgap measure. But I guess my thought with the Syracuse idea, I guess, is that Honky was making the case with Drew last year, someone who had 900 snaps underneath his belt at Texas Tech. I would imagine his growth was stunted because he didn't know the system well enough, and he struggled understanding how to fit in, and he wasn't able to find the field nearly as much as you would hope. If someone knows Tony White's defense well enough that they can fit in, even if they are maybe a little undersized or not quite up to Big Ten standards, at least he knows the system and maybe can fill that depth, right? That'd be
yeah, and I suppose it also kind of depends what Tony White feels he can actually fully institute in year one, with the players he's got. He may not be able to go all out and do exactly what he wants to do. He's going to have to kind of mesh the system for what they have. I mean, so, is one player going to be the difference between, the system he really wants and, working with what we've got? I don't know. So that remains to be seen, I think. So it's definitely, the D-line is definitely a work in progress. So
2 players for the spring ball that I'm very interested in is the transfer Judy from Texas A&M. I mean, that's a big guy. That's a guy that, the upside can be very up on him. So, I mean, he might be one of those dudes that is starting for you next year. You don't know. And he has the whole offseason to get there. And the other guy is Cameron Leonard, who is here early. So, he was in the All-American games in high school. He was a high recruit. He's listed 6'3", 245. I don't know if that's his exact size right now. That's just what I saw listed. So, my guess is, if he's gonna be playing D-line, he's gonna need to be a bit heavier than that. But this is it's a good starting point, I think. And then when you start to add in some of the walk-ons and we get the development going over the spring, it'll be fun to see where this D-line's at towards the end of it. So let's move on. And the next spot here, the edge, again, some of this, sometimes I think these guys, there could be some overlap. There might be a time where an edge guy, a big edge guy, could line up as a D end in a certain set or two. We saw that last year at times with a guy like O'Shawn or a guy like Garrett Nelson would have hand in the turf and down, but sometimes they'd be stand-up as well. As we look at the edge roster here, we have MJ Sherman, a junior, 6'3", 250. He's a transfer from Georgia, one of the 3 that we've had. Chief Borders, a sophomore, 6'4", 240, transfer from Florida. Jamari Butler, sophomore, 6'5", 245, and he had went into the transfer portal, and he's one of the guys that took his name back out, and I'm glad he did. We could use the depth from him. I think he's been developed over the last couple of years. He's starting to get ready. I mean, you saw him last year a few times on the field that he was there was a sparkle with him, and let's see what he can do here now going into year 3. Blaze Gunnarsson, another big guy, 6'6", 250. So just looking at those top 4 guys there, everyone's between 240 and 250. They're all 6'3" to 6'6". There's some size there. Kai Whalen is a sophomore, 6'5", 235, and he's a junior college player that's come in here. Jake Applegate, redshirt freshman, 6'4", 220. And then the 2 true freshmen, Maverick Noonan, freshman, 6'3", 245, and Princewell Monomalin, freshman, 6'4", 230. A lot of upside with a lot of these guys. But, we'll start at the top there. Those are the guys that are really the ones that you're going to be expecting to play the biggest roles, those top 4. And we'll kind of see where that goes. Dave?
Yeah, wow. I mean, a bunch of names that didn't play that much or weren't on the roster last year, right? I mean, with O'Shawn and et cetera, not here Nelson. So I mean, Jamari Butler is the one name that sticks out. Yeah. Of someone who was really showing last year, and you're right. We're glad that he took his name out of that transfer portal. Blaze Gunnarson's been a name that, highly recruited. Everybody was excited that we got him out of Iowa, and hasn't really shown much. But I mean, he did start to play a little bit more last year as well, so he could make a big jump. I think this is where I would look at, even whether it's someone like Butler or Gunnerson or some of these transfers who they brought in specifically but didn't play that much, like Chief Borders, for example, and saying, like, are they going to make a big jump because of the change in coaching philosophy and approach, all those type of things, right? You're looking for at least one or two of these guys to make a big jump, because there's not a lot of folks here that have had a lot of on-field production.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to say the same thing. I don't mean to be a broken record here, but, we brought in O'Shawn last year, and O'Shawn was the top transfer of the transfer portal, but we got him in here in June. And so I don't know that we have a really good example yet defensively the last couple of years of the portal of somebody that came in and right away really took over, as opposed to last week when we talked about wide receivers. The last couple of years between Samari Torre and Trey Palmer, we had guys that came in and they significant play time, and they were your leading receivers that next season. But they also were here right now. They went through spring and they went through all the offseason parts. So, when we talk about guys in the past, one difference, I don't know if MJ Sherman or Chief Borders, is as talented or has the same skill set as what O'Shawn did coming in, but I know that they're going to be here now, and we get to see that. And we've heard Coach Rule talk multiple times about the importance of practice. It's the most important thing to him, and that's part of the development. I don't know how you can get better and get developed if you're not there at practice. And that's what all these guys that we're talking about, these transfers, they're all here right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And Boomer, I think Chief Borders will make a lot of the best names lists.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. That's an easy one. Yeah.
I mean,
man, that's another young room. I know we've talked about this in some of the other, roster slots like we talked about last week too, but man, you've got one junior, no seniors, a whole bunch of sophomores and freshmen. So be interesting. So plenty of everyone able to step up. So yeah.
One advantage that they do have, again, with Borders and Sherman both being on campus right now too, they just went through that whole 8-week program that, weightlifting and training and everything leading up to spring, is that, this is a whole new staff. This is a whole new system, and these guys are going to be learning this together. So hopefully during this spring point, there's not going to be a bunch of guys that are feeling like they're left out, if that makes sense, like to where they're not going to be wondering where they are to fit in the system. They're actually going to be challenging each other to fit in the system. So maybe pushing themselves a little bit harder, because nobody is guaranteed a spot at this point. Right. So everybody's still battling.
There's no establishment.
Yeah. So there's no real pecking order at this point. So these guys maybe will work a little bit harder, knowing that they have a chance to play if they can step up and do it. I mean, I'm looking for positives here,
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to work harder, but to your point, Rob, there's clearly opportunity, right? There's playing time on the table, and someone's going to take it.
Yeah, well, someone has to. Fedoni said that last week at the presser, where he's like, there are certain guys that, feel like they have an opportunity now that they didn't feel before, because maybe they were on the bad side of a coach or just felt like they had fallen down the depth chart and that was it for them. They were done. And now you have new sets of eyes on you, and it's a new opportunity. And this happens. That's one of the benefits of a coaching change, is it's an opportunity for guys that are to impress a new set of coaches. And so let's watch the video here. Speaking of coaches, let's watch the video of Rule talking about his new defensive coordinator and that staff that he's put together.
I think it shows a real strength of Tony that he would take a job as the coordinator and have the other three coaches all be not tied to him, but tied to me previously. But he's confident in who he is and in who his system is, and brought in some great analysts. Coach McGarry's been doing this a long time. He brought in two guys, Josh Bringell and Jack Potenza. I did not know them. I mean, the greatest compliment I can give both of them is if Tony left or I would hire them again. They're fantastic. And so, but it's been fun. I think it's going to be unique. And again, the most important thing to me is that they're watching the players and how they do things, right? Are we a 4-3? Are we a 3-4? Are we a man team? Are we a zone team? His system has the flexibility to get to all that, but I need to see what we have a lot of defensive backs. I got to see what guys can do this spring, and then really figure out, hey, this is the system that'll give our guys the best chance.
He says there, are we a 4-3 or a 3-4 team and everything? I keep throwing that out, that 4-3 piece of this, because that might be how your numbers work out. If we go to a 4-3, we have more defensive linemen than if we're in a 3-4, in the sense that these edge players almost instantly turn into, at least a couple of them turn into defensive ends. I mean, that's just what happens in a 4-3. And so, it wouldn't be unheard of to see Blaze Gunnerson on the opposite side of Jamari Butler at D ends with two defensive tackles in the middle. And if that's the case, now that you go back and you look at the D line, if you're just trying to fill two spots of depth here in a 4-3, this looks a lot different all of a sudden. Now you could see where maybe you have two or three deep. And that gives you a little more hope there. If you're going straight 3-4 or 3-3 and you need three guys from that first slide on it, now you feel a little different about the depth. So and these position groups, they all kind of merge into each other a little bit, this front seven. The edge guys, some of these guys could be on the next slide with the linebackers, because there's talk of that. Like, how does Sherman or Borders, would one of them move into an inside linebacker spot? And one of the things I think is interesting, I'm going to have to reach back out to Brett Ciancia with Pick Six, is that when he's creating the book, if you remember last year, I brought that up to him about the 3-4 and the 4-3, and really it's just about the front seven. And he said he was going to look into switching the way he did his defense, that he might just call it front seven, or, the front seven, instead of trying to break it down into D line and linebackers, because there's so much overlap anymore with the way that teams do this. And guys are one play, their hands in the turf, the next one's up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really good point there. And they definitely were high on some of these transfers, like Chief Borders and MJ Sherman. So, and clearly have the pedigree in the recruiting to show they should be able to play at the Power 5 level. So should be interesting.
Yep. Well, let's move on to the linebackers and all the people that are watching right now. It's great. We have a full room, it looks like. Keep putting in your comments here. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're watching this today, tomorrow, we'd love to get your comments as well. So put your comments down there and give us a like if you like this. Give us a thumbs up. Linebackers. Starting with Luke Reimer, senior, 6'1", 225. Nick Henrich, junior, 6'3", 225. So there's a lot of experience with those top two guys. Nick Henrich is going to be out in spring, so he's nursing injuries. And even Reimer, I think, is still nursing some injuries as well from last year. So, but those two guys have a lot of snaps under their belt. So no concerns there from an experience standpoint. Garrett Snodgrass, junior, 6'3", 220. Micaiah Gabor, sophomore, 6'2", 220. Randolph Kapai, sophomore, 6'3", 205. Seth Malcolm, sophomore, 6'4", 215. And the two freshmen, Eric Fields, freshman, 6'2", 195. Dylan Rogers, freshman, 6'3", 240. One notable name here, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it, but it's from your high school, Dave. We don't have Houseman anymore. And so Houseman, who had jumped ahead of a couple of these sophomores that are on this list, he jumped ahead of them last year right away in his first year. He's transferred out and he's in Michigan now. And so I'd love to put a lovely spin on that, but I really don't know how to. I mean, he was somebody that we didn't lose a lot of game changers, I didn't think, after the coaching change. He's the one guy I really wish that we'd have back, but this is what we have right now to work with going into spring. And there's a lot of experience and there's a lot of talent, and there's some young guys that give you some excitement too.
Well, there's a good chance we'll see Houseman play in Lincoln this year.
Well, that's true.
Only would have a positive spin is if this was the Go Big Blue cast, right? I mean, literally, that's the only way to make this a positive. Switch, change the logos.
Yeah. Do it quick. Yeah.
Wear swabs when you need the guy, right?
He's pretty quick.
At least these names are familiar, right? I mean, we do have a lot more familiarity with these guys, Reimer and Heinrich, to start off. Got to stay healthy. They've got issues with that. Snodgrass, I feel like him and Nelson were up in the same recruiting class. But
yes.
It's just crazy that we just have not seen as much of Garrett Snodgrass, and hopefully that this year changes that. He could make a far more prominent role here for himself. And then there's some guys like Randolph Kapai, Seth Malcolm. We've also been waiting 2 Iowa guys, right? That we really want to see to pop. So, yeah, I mean, I think you've got some established starters. Hopefully, you see some guys rise up to challenge them, and we've should be okay here.
Yeah, Kapai's a South Dakota kid. He's from Sioux Falls, and then
Very
Malcolm
close.
and Malcolm's 8-man football from from
Sure.
Iowa. So you know, small town kid there. But I mean, there's some talent in this room, and Snodgrass, he's a guy that intrigues me a little bit because I've brought him up in the past that, you know, if it didn't work with him at linebacker here, he'd be one of those guys. We talk about fullback. I wouldn't mind seeing, you know, if we need to build up a little bit of instant depth at that position, this is the time. Spring ball is the time when you do move some people around. But no doubt, I'm guessing he'll get his first shot here at linebacker and get his chance to impress, because he's probably an example of somebody who had been here for 3 or 4 years, probably had kind of lost the eye of the coaches because he was getting passed over. Well, here's his chance now with some new coaches to try to see his way onto the field, especially with Reimer and Henrich not taking as many snaps here in the spring.
Yeah, another bunch of is healthy, you know, into the season. So,
Kapai is a guy that I think if you want to talk about the potential of the upside, it almost surprises me that either Houseman was that good, or I was kind of expecting Kapai to make the jump, and he was a year ahead of Houseman, so he'd have been in his second year last season.
Yeah,
I was kind of expecting him to do that. But look, I mean, if it takes him 3 years, if this year he plays at a level of what Houseman was playing a year ago, that would be a huge addition to this group. I mean, there's and again, if you're playing a 4-3, if you're playing a 3-4, this changes how guys are lined up and everything too. So alignment can change the look of this room quite a bit too, depending on where guys are playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, with the Hausman loss, I mean, I think you mentioned Mathis. He was the number one person in the transfer role, like post spring, though, right? It wasn't like actually like back in like December. That's what Hausman was. He was like 1 or 2 in the portal, like when everybody was in, right? And so that's how much his recruiting profile changed in 1 year playing at Nebraska. But to your point, I mean, I think these guys have the maturity and potentially some, at least the practice experience, that they could flash in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move into the secondary. And there's so many people, and you heard Coach Rule talk about it in that video. There are so many people right now in the secondary that we have to split this into position groups. And we'll start with the cornerbacks here. And I think we counted up, there was 12 listed. Tommy Hill, we had him listed last week as wide receiver, and we even said on the show, we think we screwed up. We think he's a defensive back, and we just had him erroneously listed there. And that we still got comments from people, which basically just tells me people don't watch this. They see one thing and then they just start commenting. It's like, good grief, I typed it out.
Everybody's watching this right now. Remember, Honky said that Rule's nixing the walk-on program.
There you go. Yep. Tommy Hill is listed as a corner here. Now, as I say that, I went to the Huskers website today, and he is still listed as a wide receiver on their roster on the website. But again, this is pre-spring stuff, so don't get too worked up one way or the other. He might be a DB, he might be on the offense, who knows? But we start from the top. Omar Brown, senior, 6'1", 195. He was the transfer from a year ago from Northern Iowa. Braxton Clark, senior, 6'4", 195. He's going into his 13th year at Nebraska. Tyreek Johnson, senior, 6'1", 180. He was the transfer from the 5-star transfer from Ohio State a couple of seasons ago. Really, we haven't seen much from him.
Stuck around, though.
He stuck around. I mean, I'm to be quite honest, I'm surprised that he is still on this list just because of how little we've seen from him. But who knows? Maybe, again, getting seen by a new coaching staff. Maybe this is there was talent in him to make him a 5-star at one time and to be recruited by Ohio State. We'll see what happens. Quentin Newsom, that dude's been solid. Senior, 6'1", 180.
Yep. And
now we get to the juniors. Tommy Hill, he was the transfer a year ago from Arizona, 6 foot 200. Javier Morton, junior, 6'2", 195. Malcolm Hartzog came on big time last year as a true freshman. Real shocker too. Sophomore, 5'9", 170. Taman Lynham, sophomore, 6'2", 180. And then we get to the freshmen. DeAndre Barnes, freshman, 6 feet 175. He was the one from Colorado that I think Satterfield gave the story about how he was just driving by the school and stopped by and said hi to the head coach, and that's how we made the connection to get him. Weren't even recruiting him at the time. Dwight Boodle, the second, freshman, 5'10", 170. He's been committed to us for 13 years. He's the younger brother of DiCaprio. And then Ethan Nation, freshman, 5'10", 160. He was committed to us at the All-Star game, one of those hat ceremonies. And then I hope I say this right, Sincere Safeula, freshman, 6'2", 170. Safula. So that's a big group there, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got multiple spots there where you've got guys who have played a lot and even started, right? Braxton Clark, Quentin Newsome, Tommy Hill, and Hartzog probably have all started. I guess. I mean, maybe Hartzog didn't start last year, but he played a lot.
Yeah, he had
right?
some great interceptions last year, and he was.
Yeah, and then you throw in, someone like Omar Brown who's playing. Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of depth here and a lot of names. Yep.
Yeah.
Names and size. I mean, you've got Hartzog's a 5'9" corner, and you've got Braxton Clark out there at 6'4". So there's a lot of different body types there. I mean, this is a lot of names. I'm just going to go back to what Coach Rule said in that video clip. There's a lot of dudes in the secondary here. I've never seen 12 scholarship cornerbacks. So one thing
this is where you think a few people transfer out right by the end of spring ball or over summer, right? Geesh.
Well,
you would assume there'd be some attrition, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would think some attrition, or is there ways to move guys around a little bit? Is there, is one of these corners, could they play safety? Could a safety move up to outside linebacker, in a role, or could somebody switch over to the offensive side like Tommy Hill? And the other thing is, at the very end of this discussion tonight, we're going to talk about special teams. There could be places for these guys to fall into those roles too. To me, it all starts with Quentin Newsome. I mean, that's your stud guy returning. He's the guy that's going to be the lockdown corner, hopefully on day one. I don't feel like we never really got to see Omar Brown last year. There was some hype of him last offseason. He was here during spring ball, but I think some injuries and just didn't see him, get to play as much last year. And so that's someone I'm really interested in. I still like Clark. I mean, Clark has been, I have these visions. I'm an old guy, so I have these visions of like when Michael Booker was out there, big, long, long-armed corner that, could drape a guy and just, cover the tall receivers that you're going against, at 6'4". I mean, that's a different type of body style. And he's got some quite a bit of practice under him, quite a bit of play time. So, if he can get out there, I think Hartzog, Newsome, that's a solid starting three and kind of fill in around that.
Yeah, and Tommy Hill has got experience there too, right? I struggled a little bit at times, but also can make plays. So, I mean, I think you should be able to find two starters plus two backups out of this group, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to safeties. There's 9 of them. Marquise Buford, Jr., 5'11", 190. Miles Farmer, Jr., 6'3", 200.
He's a junior.
He's been here for 13 years as well. Noah Pola-Gates, Jr., 6 foot 180. Deshaun Singleton, he was a junior college transfer a year ago, I believe. 6'3", 205. Kobe Bretz, the sophomore from Omaha Westside, 6'2", 210. Corey Collier, the sophomore, the transfer from Florida, 6'1", 180. Kane Williams, sophomore, 6'2", 200. Jaleel Martin, redshirt freshman, 6'2", 200. Then Ramir Stewart, freshman, 6 feet, 195. Yeah, go back to Miles Farmer there for a second. I mean, one of my memories, Dave, I'm going out to Denver this week to see you, but I remember being out there during the COVID year when we played Northwestern in the whatever that third week of the season that one was. And that was one of the first times, a young Farmer got out there on the field, and he had 2 interceptions in that game. But that was 2020.
That year didn't count.
Yeah. So here we are, this is he's still a junior and he brings good size to the safety room. I certainly see him getting a lot of the play time, and Buford as well. I mean, those two guys, but is this a year where can Pola-Gates, we mentioned guys like Snodgrass and some guys that have been on the on the team for a few years and just maybe need a new set of eyes looking at him. Paula Gates, I mean, came here with all of the accolades. He was in the Polynesian Bowl and, 4-star big time recruit, and we just haven't seen it quite on the field. So whether that's in special teams or can he actually start to get out there, if we're running a 3-3-5, a nickel back, are we going to get into some of those 5 defensive backs, 6 defensive back situations? Can he get his way onto the field that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, remind me, so Kane Williams was one of the transfers from Alabama, is that right?
Yeah, why am I drawing a blank on that?
And did he transfer in for this class, or was he last year? We've got so many new names, and we've got a couple familiar ones here, but him and Corey Collier, I'm trying to picture on when we get those guys transferred in.
Kane Williams
came from Florida.
Yeah, he came from Alabama, and in 2022 he did not play. He was a redshirt freshman.
Okay, so that was from last year's coaching staff. Then Corey Collier is this year's coaching staff and from Florida.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have 3.
Collier's an interesting guy too, because I think Rule was actually recruiting him in high school back in like 2019, which before he went over to the Panthers. So then, like as soon as he entered the transfer portal, he was like a Husker almost immediately. So it's we got a bunch of offers, but so that's for me that's interesting because he's a sophomore, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we saw him get playing time because he's a guy that Rule's been watching for a long time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A guy that I'm keeping my eye on, and I'm a big in-state kid, Kobe Bretz, Omaha West Side, and he was there the same year my brain is going blank. The guy that went to Oregon from Omaha West Side, the defensive back, Dickerson, Avante Dickerson. He was the big 4-star kid. Well, that same year that we didn't get Dickerson, we got Bretz out of the same secondary. But Bretz comes with some more size. Obviously, he's playing safety. And, a bigger kid like that, I mean, it'll be interesting to see him if he gets some play time out there, especially in those early games against Northern Illinois, against Louisiana Tech. If we can get some of these guys out there, there's opportunities, I think, for some of those young guys to get a few snaps. But, again, if it's not on defense, it's going to be special teams. How do they get some of these young guys onto the field early? I think you're going to see it there with special teams.
Yep, makes sense.
And heck, maybe some of them can play basketball.
Well,
oh boy.
Well, let's get to special teams. We've talked enough about
There's
that.
Boomer's slide right here.
Boomer, here's your slide.
Now
the reality is this slide looks light on names because we're only talking about the specialists that would be on it. But literally what we just went through, all these previous slides, like we said, how many countless number of those guys are going to find their way on the punt teams and kickoff returns, and some of those DBs are going to be returning kicks and returning punts, so that's an opportunity. But specifically to this right now, this roster, these are the 4 guys that are specialists. And we have Marco Ortiz, senior deep snapper, transfer from Florida. Timmy Bleekrode is the junior kicker. So he came here last season. Brian Buscini, junior punter. He was from Montana a year ago. And then Tristan Alvano, the true freshman kicker from Omaha West Side. Normally, as they said, they wouldn't normally have 2 kickers on scholarship at the same time. But Alvano is potentially a generational, once-in-a-generation kind of in-state kicker for sure. He was just outstanding at West Side. And to me, he was a non-negotiable. You had to go out and get him. So I'm glad that they did.
Yeah, and you can't really have any complaints with the specialists that we have here. I mean, you got a couple with experience, which is good. Alvano, like you said, has all the potential in the world as that home state kid. So, politically, you had to give him that offer. And you mentioned it, just this is a place for opportunities for lots of people to get playing time. Now, we've heard it spoken of already. We've flogged that Naquatic Equine many times about how important special teams is when it comes to needing game-changing plays. And, Rule and Foley have talked about that. That's something big they're really focusing on this year, because our special teams efficiency has been crap, in terms of especially return game. It's been awful for years. And I think, you'll see guys work themselves into it, but I think you'll see guys, a good chance of players like Billy Kemp who've returned, punts in the past.
Yeah.
I think you're likely to see him probably starting the season. And it's a good spot for Tommy Hill to maybe, get some kickoff returns. And we've got a lot of running backs still on the roster. It's an opportunity for some of them to, fill in those spots too. So, but yeah, it's going to be an opportunity for people who really want to go out and make a name for themselves. We've got some experience on the return game, and for the love of God, if you could just not have to fair catch every one of them and just go forward for a few yards, that'll be a nice positive for the season.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing I want to highlight, I'm going to go back for a second to the coaching staff. There was a season not too long ago where that special teams analyst was what we had, and that was it. And here we have Ed Foley, who's quickly ingratiating himself to Husker Nation. People like him a lot here. He's a kind of a boisterous guy, and he's been around going to all these different schools.
He fits in well.
He fits in really well. So he's our special teams coordinator, but we also have Josh Martin, a special teams analyst. So there's definitely more. You would definitely look at this and say that there's more of an emphasis being put, at least from just a bodies, getting guys out there. Boomer, go back to, you've talked about this before. It starts with the emphasis and practice on this. Mm-hmm. What do you put onto it? And having two guys dedicated to that, and then what Coach Rules talked about that. I mean, what does that make you feel going into spring ball that they're going to take this serious and really treat this like the third element of the football team?
Yeah, I think we've seen it from prior regimes, dynamic names that, I think they've said they pay attention to it, but clearly the results showed they weren't, or they certainly weren't giving it the focus
it was hard to hide at times, that's for sure.
It was, yeah, very much so. And that's been the case for a while, it seems here. And again, we mentioned before, special teams isn't the sexy thing people like to talk about. No one loves talking special teams, punting, punt returns, things like that. But
so you do. You love talking.
Yeah, because it's a huge part of the game, and it's forgotten and misunderstood and underappreciated. And when it works, that when you don't have to talk about it, that's great because it's working. And that's what you want it to be.
Boomer, remind me. Yeah. Bleak Road was kicking for us last year. Who else was also a place kicker? Did we have a kickoff specialist? Why am I thinking there's one other name that?
Yeah, gosh, was somebody else kicking last year?
A bunch of walk-ons.
Yeah, we had people all over the place. Yeah.
But Bleak Road is established, but we got a comment there from our friend of the show, Eric Francis, I think, saying that he thinks Alvano is going to win the starting job by August. That should be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be a good opportunity, I think, for both of them to see what they can do. And Tal, if you're kicking them out of the end zone every kickoff, that's what you want. Give that person the job. So.
I'll make a comparison. It's a weird comparison, but I'm going to make one. We talked about Hoiberg earlier, and that this season, it hasn't been a success. We didn't get it to the postseason, but it was better. At least it was better than what we'd seen in previous years. Last year's special teams, there's still some bad memories of onside kicks and some weird things, but for the most part, I mean, if you had to grade it compared to some of the absolute disasters that we had in the years prior, we at least started to make a 30-yard field goal again. We started to do some fairly normal things. And really, Buschini, of all the guys, I mean, that's really important to have him back. I mean, he changed the field for us. And he was punting like a Big Ten punter was last year. And that was instantaneously noticeable on the field and played a big role for us. So I see a lot of benefit there. The Marco Ortiz one is interesting to me, the deep snapper. Just because, again, sitting at 100+ scholarships in a very traditional sense, I usually think of deep snappers could probably come out of your walk-on program after a couple of years, but at least right away in year one, they want to make sure they have somebody that they, can count on right away. And we lost our deep snapper from a year ago, so all right, that they offered the scholarship right away for it, but it was better. It was better last season than it had been prior.
Yeah, the dumpster fire wasn't smoldering quite as much. So
it's like one of those tire fires that just really hard to get out. So it's a little
exactly.
Dave, to answer your question too, yes, we did have a kickoff specialist last year, and in fact, I had him on the show last summer. Brendan Frankie,
that's right.
Gretna graduate, Morningside University transfer. Only 15 kickoffs were returned last year for an average of 18 yards, which is really good. It was best for like 9th in the country, I think, overall.
Okay.
So that was actually
wasn't doing that
point of our Huskers last year.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I mean, Bleak Royd wasn't doing that. So it'll be interesting to see who, if anything, is our kickoff guy compared to our place kicker. And for the deep snapper, Marco Ortiz, if you're listening to the show right now, if we have to say your name at any point the rest of the year, that's a bad sign. We don't want to mention your name, Marco. Do your job, and we'll be very happy.
No
with
offense,
it.
Big he
Marco.
did
We
at
might
the
get you on the
spring
show,
game or
though.
something. You know, maybe he does
Yeah,
a
you want to
really
come on
good
the
job
show? Sure.
Yeah. If we have him on the spring game, if he does a really good job, it's something we notice how well it's being a deep snapper is, you know, like whatever, we can bring it up. But
speaking
other
of deep,
than that,
speaking of deep snapper, Damian Jackson, the former Husker who the Navy SEAL that he went to Buffalo last year, and now he's actually working out. I think I read that he was working out even in Nebraska this offseason, trying to get into the pros to be a deep snapper. He's 30 years old, but if you can, I mean, that's a skill. If you've got it, you could, you know, make a decent little career out of that.
If he makes the NFL, there's already an option for his movie.
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
I turn 49 next week, and I'm actually thinking about trying out as like a water specialist for the Huskers.
So, Husker fans, you know, Redcasters watching this, you know, like I said, give us a thumbs up for what you've seen here if you like it, and leave a comment for us. Tell us where you think we got it right. Tell us where you think we got it wrong. Try to be polite. I mean, you know, come on, use your manners. But, you know, I think for the most part, this at least gives you a good idea. We're not trying to predict depth charts yet or anything like that. I mean, my goodness, we haven't seen these guys play, and the coaches haven't either. But we wanted to at least give an idea going into spring ball. And that's what this was about. We'll put a link in the show here as well to last week's show where we did this with the offense. So, you know, we're just trying to go through position groups, say who the names are that are scholarship guys. We hope that we see a lot of walk-ons, you know, make names for themselves too. I'm a big walk-on proponent, but this gives you an idea of some of those 103 or 104 scholarship guys that we have. Just a crazy number of guys for Coach Rule and staff to go through in their first spring.